Welcome to Babblecom 5. So this is A Call to Arms, which is the fourth spin-off film from Babylon 5, direct to TV, not a cinematic release. But arguably, from what I remember, it is probably amongst the more cinematic of the films. Quite a lot of sort of action going on, set in 2266, which is after the River of Souls film in terms of the internal chronology, and 4 years after the end of season 5 of the series itself. But it is actually a lead-in to another series called Crusade, which was a spin-off series from Babylon 5. So I'm going to start this up. I do remember this one reasonably well, I think, and it does have a lot of the sort of characters who we are very familiar with in it, but it also introduces several new ones as well. So it's interesting because of that, and it also features the return of the Techno-Mages to a degree. So I'm just going to start it up and get into it with you, and I'll see how I go, and hopefully my recording will go smoother than it did for the River of Souls. Good old ISN. It's the 5th anniversary of the Interstellar Alliance. Yeah. There's mention of a recent telepath crisis, which is interesting. So that suggests that the telepath war has just happened. I'm not sure who does the sound for this one. It feels a bit different. A big old Charlene class war cruiser very close up. So it looks like someone's transferring to a White Star off of the Charlene. There's Sheridan and Garibaldi. So apparently Garibaldi's doing well with Edgar's Industries still. And Sheridan's had Garibaldi helping him build some new ships, basically, and guy called Drac is in charge of construction. He's just dragging his heels a bit for their tastes. So it seems they've been reverse engineering Minbari and Vorlon technology to meld it with Earth tech to create new ships. But they've been trying to keep it under wraps because it would make everyone else nuts, as Garibaldi puts it. So the White Star's on full burn trying to keep itself clear, but apparently something is able to keep up with it despite Sheridan's belief that nothing can. And we see an image of it in a little orb held between somebody's fingertips. And then it jumps. As cryptic as ever. Ooh, they've changed the... Oh, yes. They've changed the hyperspace CGI. I don't like it. I'm too old school. This is quite a relatively new film, so the graphics are bound to have come along. Sheridan's saying he doesn't really know a lot about these new ships since he saw the original designs. So these are prototype destroyers for use by the Interstellar Alliance. The Victory and the Excalibur, if I remember rightly, and these are big boys. They've got little yellow work bee Star Furies that are in use. They're saying they haven't got the gravity quite up to 1G, but Garibaldi likes it because it means he's 5 pounds lighter when he's on board, which is funny. Apparently they've adopted a submarine configuration for the bridge, rather than being a circular bridge, as is conventional. Apparently they haven't actually taken it out anywhere yet, so this guy's been busy designing it and has lots and lots of theoretical ideas about whether or not it's going to work, but he hasn't actually taken it out for a spin. So Garibaldi is now telling him to start it up and take it out of space dock. And they stalls. Garibaldi is not impressed. Sheridan was supposed to be getting a message from Delenn, but in fact what he's getting is a series of random images. Quite Twilight Zone-esque. Garibaldi says he's been in there for half an hour, but from our point of view it only looked like moments. Tell Garibaldi's on the warpath, it's funny. Garibaldi says things are easier on Grabble and 5, and I suspect we're about to find out that in fact they're not at all. This music is weird. I'm going to have to find out who the composer is at the end. It doesn't feel like Christopher Franke. The scanners have detected a weapons violation. From Lady of a Race, doesn't seem common. I'm going to find out that she's called Durina. She gives Zack like one knife, and Zack says all of it. And out comes a much bigger knife, and another one, and another, and another, and another, and so on and so forth. And a garroting wire as well, just for good measure. Zack's watching with wry amusement as she plucks various things out. She doesn't say a word either the whole time. Up until she asks where the lost people go. Zack tells her down below Brown Sector, which is about right. Back on the destroyer, Sheridan is sort of sleeping, but fitfully, and then he has a rather interesting dream. Probably thanks to the images that he saw earlier that appeared garbled, but in fact weren't. They were designed to trigger this. Gellin is saying this isn't just a test, and it's a dead planet basically. There's no sound, nothing. Gellin refers to this as an electron incantation. So this is basically a warning. And he leaves a name, Doltron 7. Looks like the ship's underway, but not perhaps in the way you might think. It's the Excalibur he's on. So the beast's basically being towed by lots and lots of transports towards the firing range. And the Garibaldi says this means that Drake gets to live for another 10 minutes. And Drina's now aboard the station taking in the sights. She's looking for signs which are not terribly obvious. She's found one which seems to indicate a way that she needs to go. And it seems that someone is keeping an eye on the people who are keeping an eye on the signs. She's found another one. Certainly taking her off the beaten track, because she's got to climb a ladder to pop out onto another floor. And the guy who was monitoring the signs has just kicked her in the head and knocked her out, which is rather harsh. Now she's woken up in the same place that Sheridan found himself as well. And she sees Sheridan at first, and then a Drac with a galaxy in his hand that then disappears into his fist. And Galen says to her that it isn't her world, but it shares the same fate as her world. And he tells her to make sure that she picks the right target when the time comes. And then she's back in the real world, for better or worse. There's a blind guy who's interrogating her now. He's a Thieves Guild. She quickly educates the guy who kicked her in the head. She is neither chained nor helpless. So basically she gets the rules of the guild outlined to her. They take 10%, give her a place to stay, but she has to keep her head down reasonably low in order to not draw attention to the guild's presence. Now we get to see test firing with the Excalibur. Gloriously 90s targeting graphics. And the Excalibur has blown up an asteroid. So the initial firing is at level 1. Garibaldi wants them to go to level 2 because Sheridan wasn't impressed by level 1. It's like a White Star's main guns. But Drake points out that the really big guns will take a massive amount of power from the systems, because they're loosely based on Vorlon tech, but they don't really know what the hell they're doing. Interestingly, there are Minbari crewing it, which is... I thought it was going to be mainly an Earth ship because it's got Earth tech, but apparently not. Sheridan gets a glimpse as if Earth and the Moon are outside the front viewing port, but not so much, obviously. Everyone's a little bit perturbed by his sudden reaction, as if they were about to fire on Earth. So the lights dim as the main gun powers up. So there's 3 beams from the wingtips joining at the front of the ship, and then firing out once joined. It takes a full minute to recharge, apparently. Then all of a sudden, Sheridan is elsewhere again, in a world with 2 unusual moons. So Galen is chatting to the Techno-Mages, who are having an argument about revealing themselves and sending probes even outside of their space. And Sheridan's been brought in to observe. So the others allow him this contact, but then take their leave rather abruptly, having wondered if Sheridan was the best he could do. And as Sheridan notes, the Techno-Mages have been here since the Shadow War, because they didn't want their technology falling into the wrong hands. And they used technology to represent magic, and they're going to be here hiding for 20 to 30 years, apparently, despite the Shadow War being over. So Galen explains that since the Shadows left Zahadum, their allies have been building their own resources, and he's identified the Drac as being known to Sheridan, and they've been monitoring them, and they think they're about to move. And he's warning him that basically the Drac are considering attacking Earth. So Galen has had to can't tell him everything. So Galen is basically laying down breadcrumbs for him. And he's saying not to tell anyone else because they've got spies everywhere, the Drac. So he's got to go carefully. So then some faces appear out of stone. And Sheridan gets one last glimpse of the night sky. And then there's Babylon 5. So Sheridan suddenly says he needs the White Star to pick him up because they need to go to Babylon 5. But he's not saying why. And Garibaldi's wondering what the hell's going on, as is Drake. Which is not unreasonable because it's a bit random. It's a funny exchange between Garibaldi and John on the bridge, as John scribbles furiously on a pad. But he is following Galen's advice and keeping things very much undercover, so to speak. Sheridan does ask Garibaldi to find out about Doltron 7, despite him saying he's never heard of it before. And Garibaldi asks if it's important. He says it could be. He's doing pretty good work on his sketches. This is the EAS. Is it Karen? Sharon? Charon. Now this guy, I think he was Kern in Star Trek Next Generation. Worf's brother. And apparently this captain has just altered course of Babylon 5 out of the blue. So of course his second is questioning why he's doing that. But I imagine he's had a Galen dream. Oh, this new jump point, don't like it. I don't know why they randomly changed it. Very odd. Here's Lockley. Still looking after the station. Lockley asks Garibaldi if he knows what's going on. He says, nope, hasn't got a clue. Situation normal then. But Sheridan's asked her to run his sketches through the computer to see if the computer thinks any of the people involved are on the station already. So Doreen is quietly pickpocketing on the promenade, which is nice. She's been spotted by security, who have her image, of course. Interestingly, I think the security is still wearing the green uniforms that they were from the time of the breakaway, even now. Dorina is from Xander Prime, apparently, but Lockley says it's actually a dead world, but Sheridan says it is because it was wiped out by the Shadow's death cloud towards the end of the Shadow War. There's Captain Anderson of the Charon, so it's Charon. Lockley realises this is the guy who's one of Sheridan's drawings. So that's 2 out of the people on the sketches. Haha, he was drawn here. Badum-tish. Oops. So Dorina immediately assaults Sheridan on sight. Brilliant. She holds him responsible for her world. Dorina and Sheridan have a very frank conversation. She basically thinks that he could have stopped the Shadow Planet killer, but he tells her that wouldn't have been possible because their forces weren't strong enough to take it out anyway, even if they had heard about it in time, which they didn't. So... But Sheridan's telling her that it was actually the Drac that pulled the trigger anyway, because they were helping the Shadows to do their dirty work. She does calm down, and she talks about her dream as well. It's quite funny because Captain Anderson is saying that he might need something bigger than an Earth Force destroyer, and Sheridan's saying he may have just the thing. So Sheridan's basically told Drake not to accept any messages not from him in order to keep himself secure. And of course that means that Garibaldi won't be able to contact Drake either. Dorina's just quietly sharpening her knife at the back of the bridge. Yeah, so she's taking the Charon to the Advanced Destroyer dock. So basically they brought the crew of the Charon onto the Excalibur and the Victory because they use fairly standard Earth Force controls, and they're just going to take over the ships. Garibaldi's second in command says it's not like he's going to steal the ships or anything, is it? And Garibaldi's like, yep, it is. He would do if he thinks he needs them. And of course he does think he needs them, so he's going to. It's rather like Kirk pinching the Enterprise out of space dock. So Anderson's got the Victory, Sheridan's got the Excalibur. Grav engines online. Apparently the main weapon system is controlled rather like Big Track is, with a touchpad. So you're setting a course for Doltron 7 per Galen's references. And off they go. A little bit like Minbari cruisers in the sense they've got sort of 3 fins, but it's more geometric. And the space dock's actually got rotating sections, so it must have gravity. But the Excalibur and the Victory have got sort of Minbari type artificial gravity, which has been more or less perfected by the Earth engineers. So Doltron 7 is supposed to be a very nice planet, but the ship's basically saying it's screwed. He's clearly been hit by the Shadow Vorlon killer, Shadow Planet killer rather. So Sheridan's saying this was nowhere near the Shadow War, and they would have heard about it by now, so it's got to be something recent. The only thing they can find on the surface is a drowsy distress signal. No life forms. Of course, there's reminding Dorina a lot of what happened to her home world. Taking a standard Earth shuttle down. Oh, 2 shuttles actually. They're dressed in their sort of what they tend to wear on Mars. They're sort of like light environment suits with oxygen. Sheridan says this is the place he saw in his dream. And they found the beacon and a dead Drazi. So Anderson's saying this only happened a week ago. Well, Sheridan thinks the Drazi's only been dead for a few days, so he might have seen it happen. This is where Darina's skills now come in handy, because although they can't see anything on the Drazi, she knows something they don't. She's found a data crystal in his armpit, effectively. Apparently the pouch that she was referring to underneath the left arm is to do with reproduction, Sheridan tells Anderson. To which Anderson then responds to Darina that the only valuable thing he's got on him is his wristwatch. There's another frank conversation between Darina and Sheridan, because Sheridan's basically saying that Shadow Tech has turned up before and they've had their butts kicked every time they've encountered it. So Darina's thinking that perhaps she should just shoot herself now. So Garibaldi is now heading to Doltron 7, and Drake wants to come along to make sure that his babies, quote unquote, are okay. So the White Star takes off in that general direction again. Of course, the Excalibur and the Victory will be considering their next moves at this point. Anderson's got a comms line through to his wife and his daughter. Apparently they're saying that he's deserted, which of course is understandable. He's promising his daughter that he'll keep her safe from monsters. It's Lynn and Sarah. Sarah's the girl. The Drazi crystal's been decoded. So the Drazi scanned the cloud when it was attacking the planet. It's been a busy Drazi. So he traced them back to where they hid the cloud, but then he went back to Doltron 7, but then of course they caught up with him there. Drac fighters. We've seen them before in this series when they attacked Len's White Stars. So the Drac are scanning them, but of course they don't recognise the Excalibur or the Victory. The Drac asked them to identify themselves, but Sheridan's said not to respond. So Darina's suggesting that they sort of make themselves out to be potential allies. Then all of a sudden there's a big burst of comms, very powerful, from outside the system, and the Drac pause their approach. So Sheridan realises the jig's up, goes to their equivalent of red alert, and they start pouring it on, but the Drac break away. And actually the Drac fighters actually do take pot shots at the ships, which is stupid. But the ship's capable of deflecting 80% of energy weapons directed at them. So basically they can't do jack to them unless they've got massive numbers. So the Victory opens up on its attackers. Quite why 4 fighters thought they could take on 2 destroyers, I have no idea, but there you go. It's the Excalibur's closing range. And the Drac are heading for a null field. And Sheridan fires his main guns, which of course depowers the ship. They're 10 seconds out from the null field. It's like a cloaking barrier. So I guess he shot ahead of him to try and clear the way in case there was something that they couldn't see in there. They've just realised this is exactly where the Drazi said there were too many ships for him to deal with, so he went back to Doltron 7. And they're now surrounded by a lot of Drac ships. a lot. The Victory very sensibly comes to a stop outside the field. And the Excalibur comes flying out of the field, nearly hitting the Victory on its way out, and firing its aft guns. So Sheridan's plan is to run away very, very, very quickly, because he doesn't think any of their ships are jump capable. So he figures that if they can get out fast enough, they can't do anything about it, basically. Which is a fair plan. He says that their fleet is on the move. They've only sent some ships after them that they could spare. So Sheridan's going to go for Earth maximum burn off the beacon to try and get past them in hyperspace, because they're only as fast as their slowest ship. And then Sheridan calls through to Lockley on B5. So basically Sheridan's telling Lockley that they've got a death cloud coming to Earth, and they're going to need every single ship they can get, but because there's a tall order, because he's not part of the Earth command structure now, but of course she is. So she's going to do what she can to convince them, whilst Jalen sends in the aligned ships as fast as she can, but they haven't got long. And the problem is that obviously Lockley hasn't seen a death cloud in action, whereas he has, so he knows what the stakes are, but she doesn't really get it. So he's just asking her to trust him. So she's asking to speak to President Susanna Luchenko, who's the president of the Earth Alliance, I think at the end of season 4. So she's had quite a long stint, it would seem. I think she put it through on Gold Channel. Sheridan calls Garibaldi at about the same time. He's warning Garibaldi about the attack, but Garibaldi's just been told about an anomaly in their communication system, so you can guess what that means, can't you? Hello, Mr. Drake. Garibaldi's wondering why he's turned on them, because Drake's Martian born, so he had a uphill struggle to get anything job-wise, despite Sheridan making sure that he did get the job. I mean, putting a gun on Garibaldi in the middle of a group of analyst shock is pretty stupid for someone who's allegedly quite a smart engineer. But that's intelligent smart, not street smart, clearly. So apparently the Drac only have one one planet killer. That's about the only piece of good news, and Sheridan's just hoping to God that Earth have mobilised. Yep, and there are lots and lots of Earth destroyers and mega classes standing by. One of which is the Hermes. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. And here comes the Shadow Planet Killer and the Drac. Game on. So Sheridan's basically saying leave the Drac fleet to the defence grid, the planetary defence grid, which as we know is quite potent from the end of season 4, whilst the other ships try and punch a hole through the Drac defences around the planet killer so that Sheridan and Anderson can try and take a shot at it. The Drac ships, generally speaking, aren't actually that powerful in and of themselves. They've got a lot of fighters, but their capital ships aren't terribly impressive. They're more like carriers. So if they can punch a hole through them, they should be able to get through them. It's the planet killer that's the problem. So Sheridan's probing in the cloud to try and figure out what it's made of, basically. So they've never been able to scan it in the past, but of course this ship's based on Vorlon tech, so they may have a better chance, and that's what Sheridan's counting on. And Dorina recalls Galen's advice to make sure that she hits the right spot. So Dorina's thinking like a thief, and she's saying that the main jewels are hidden next to the safe rather than in the safe. So the big obvious joint that Sheridan's identified, she dismisses, and she identifies a smaller joint with lots of short-range defences around it. And she thinks that's the primary target they want to try and disable the whole thing. And Anderson thinks they can get one but not both. So they've got to pick one. So Dorina's sure she's right, basically, and Sheridan's inclined to believe her. So Excalibur and Victory pour it on so they can get in first. They've got an interesting combination of turreted and fixed weaponry and aft weaponry as well, so they can cover themselves really well. Victory's lost her rear guns, so she's in trouble. And as Anderson's recalling the promise he made his daughter. So Anderson's plan is to have Excalibur blow a hole in their defences with their main guns, which Victory will then go through, then use its main guns to get in the rest of the way. Dorina's funny, fair play. I think Captain Anderson is doing a Sheridan special and choosing to go to ramming speed. I'm not quite clear on why. I assume his main gun is still active, but slightly puzzling. So the bridge isn't on the end of the neck as you might have thought. It's further back towards the main body. So now they've got to leg it and get clear because the mechanism's been activated early, so it's sort of folding in on itself and firing its missiles at itself. So even the Drac ships are getting hit as well, into the bargain. Sheridan says faster in the helmswoman says this is as faster as I can go. So basically all the ships that are inside the sphere of the World Killer are now getting clobbered by its missiles. And then we see that the planetary defences are indeed active, but the Drac are sending ships through, and the ships are releasing something into the atmosphere. So although it seems like victory has been achieved, something else is now going on. Sheridan just bows his head because he knows what's happening. So does everyone else on board. Dorina doesn't understand though. And this is basically what then leads us into Crusade. And we see the Techno-Mages gathered again looking at Earth in one of the small glass spheres. So Sheridan describes it as poisoning the well. An act of spite. Says they've released a biogenetic plague into the atmosphere and Earth is now under quarantine. So they reckon they've got 5 years because the plague wasn't adapted properly for human biology. But that could change. They're basically looking at global population destruction if they can't find a cure for it. So Sheridan figures that because the plague has come to them from outside, they'll go and look for a cure outside. So they're going to turn the Excalibur into a research vessel to try and find a cure. So like the Arthurian legends of old, Excalibur is going to return to help them in their greatest hour of need. And unfortunately the Excalibur dock was destroyed by the Drac on the way out, which means that for now the Excalibur is the only one of a kind. And we see a strange black triangular ship appearing, and it seems Galen has broken the exile of the Techno-Mages to come and assist them. So the clock is ticking. Yes, and that was a call to arms. Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it. I mean, I always have enjoyed it actually, because it does move along really well. It's well paced. It feels like it was a TV movie, which is I suppose the complaint that I had about the River of Souls. Was that it didn't feel like a film. It felt far more like a sort of an extended episode. But this one does actually genuinely feel like it was a film, and it makes sense because in many respects it's a pilot for Crusade. Crusade actually ended up struggling for reasons that were not entirely its fault, and I need to do a little bit of reading around exactly what happened with it in terms of the sort of the production issues that went on with it, but it really wasn't JMS's fault particularly. I don't think it was just one of those things. It just didn't quite take off. No pun intended. But this was actually, it worked really well because it incorporates many of the things that we were used to from the series, and it brought back the Techno-Mages, which were, it's a really sort of interesting idea, which we didn't see a huge amount of. I mean, they only appeared in one episode. I think it was was it as early as season 2, or was it maybe season 3? And they were this sort of, association of, I mean, effectively, they use signs to give the illusion of magic, but they had a lot of deep knowledge, and they didn't want it falling into the hands of the shadows, so they voluntarily moved themselves into exile in order to avoid the Shadow War. But they weren't so far away that they couldn't still communicate, which is basically what becomes clear in from Call to Arms here. So we have Galen basically sort of breaking ranks and assisting Earth to a certain extent in the Interstellar Alliance in defending Earth. So this would then lead into the Crusade and the quest to try and find a cure for the Drac plague. But it didn't get terribly far, unfortunately. I think there were only 13 episodes. They didn't even get a full season. which is a bit of a shame because obviously they had the whole Babylon 5 universe to potentially play in, and obviously it would have expanded it way beyond the station itself, but it's still within the station's life span. So yeah, I mean, as a standalone film, it's a good science fiction film, and if you're familiar with the background of Babylon 5 and the events that took place there, then Call to Arms makes perfect sense. It's a perfectly logical expansion of that universe, and yeah, it's definitely one of the better films. I mean, I don't know whether people would say it's the best one. It doesn't reuse entirely known characters, but Lockley's in it, Sheridan's in it, Garibaldi's in it, Zach Allen is in it briefly as well. So there are quite a few familiar faces, and there are people who we would understand the role of in terms of the series as a whole. But I do think it is one of the stronger films. And obviously, there's a lot of good action bit, and there's some decent space battles and stuff in it as well, and all that good stuff. I mean, I wasn't a fan of this newer style of sort of jump points and so on. They use a radically, well, I would say it is a radically different effect for the jump gates. And I don't know. I'm just an old school kind of guy, I suppose. I think I just prefer the ones that I was used to. I mean, you tend to, don't you? But anyway, so but generally speaking, I mean, I think the design of the Excalibur and the Victory was a very logical extension of sort of Earth Tech meeting Minbari Tech meeting Vorlon Tech. Decently powered point defense weapons, rear-facing weapons, which interestingly Earthships have always had. Actually, it's often the thing that doesn't get included on science fiction ships, the ability to shoot backwards, which sounds daft, I know, but it's often the way with them. So all of that, and the main weapon that draws all the power and that sort of thing. It's all these little sort of quirks, and they were equipped with fighters as well. But of course, we don't really see that in this film because they weren't fully staffed, they weren't fully manned. So yeah, all in all, I think it's a really solid film, and it's well worth watching it if you haven't already caught it. And in the new year, I will probably head into Crusade and have a look at it and do a little bit of research on exactly what happened with it, because I'm going to have to refresh myself on that one, definitely. But all sorts of shenanigans basically with a network, and it just couldn't keep going because there was too much conflict behind the scenes. Is my basic understanding of it. It's a shame because it probably would have covered off. It would have given us more insight into the expanded universe of B5 had it managed to continue, but it didn't. So I shall leave it there, as I need to get this commentary edited down a touch, and hopefully this time it will actually stick. So cheers for now, and I will catch you maybe in the new year now. Cheers for now.